The Duke thought she would always stay. Until her room was empty. A true story. There are people in this world who believe that love, once given, will stay forever. They do not do anything to keep it. They do not water it or tend to it. They simply assume that because it is there today, it will be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day that follows. This is a story about one such person. And about the woman who quietly proved him wrong. His name was Edward. People who knew him well, or thought they did, called him the Duke. Not because he had a title or came from a noble family. He had neither. But he carried himself as though he did. He walked into rooms slowly, as if the room needed a moment to adjust to his presence. He spoke in a low, steady voice that made people lean in. He had the kind of confidence that some men are simply born with and never once think to question. He was not a bad man. That is the important thing to understand before the story goes any further. He paid his bills. He was kind to strangers. He had a warm laugh that arrived without warning and filled whatever space he was in. His friends admired him. His colleagues respected him. By any measure that the outside world uses to judge a man, Edward was doing very well. But there are measures the outside world cannot see. And in those quiet, private measures, Edward had been failing for years, slowly, without drama, without any single moment he could point to and call the mistake. His failure was not the kind that makes noise. It was the kind that happens in silence. In the spaces between conversations. In the small things he never noticed and the smaller things he never said. Her name was Mara. She had been in his life for 7 years. They had met at a mutual friend's dinner, she had laughed at something he said, and he had immediately wanted to make her laugh again. In the beginning, he tried. He would call her in the middle of the afternoon just to hear her voice. He remembered the little things she mentioned, her favorite tea, the book she was halfway through, the way she liked the window open even when it was cold outside. He paid attention, in those early months, the way people do when they are still trying to win something. And Mara, warm, thoughtful, perceptive Mara, had loved him for it. She had loved him the way a person loves when they feel truly seen. She gave him her time freely. She gave him her care and her patience and her laughter. She rearranged her world to make room for his. She showed up for him in ways that were so quiet and consistent that they eventually became invisible, the way the walls of a house are invisible because you have stopped noticing them, even though they are the only reason the whole structure is standing. 7 years. Through the early joy and the comfortable middle and the long, gray stretch that follows when two people stop choosing each other and simply coexist. Through arguments that got resolved and arguments that got buried. Through the version of Edward that tried and the version that stopped trying and never noticed the difference. She kept showing up. That was her greatest gift. And it was the one he forgot to be grateful for. Mara had a room in the house that was entirely her own. It was not large. It had a single window that faced the garden, a bookcase that was always overflowing, a small wooden desk where she kept a candle and a journal and a framed photograph of her and her mother at the sea. It smelled faintly of old books and the lavender candle she lit in the evenings. It was the one space in the house that felt entirely like her. Edward never went in without knocking. When they were younger, Mara had found this respectful. She had told her sister once, over the phone, in the way women share small private things, that Edward always knocked on her door, and wasn't that something? Her sister had agreed that yes, that was something. Neither of them stopped to wonder, at the time, whether knocking on a door is truly respect or simply disinterest wearing a polite face. Years later, Mara would understand the difference. He did not enter her room because her room did not concern him. Her inner world, the thoughts she kept in her journal, the worries she sat with at night, the dreams she had quietly let go of one by one, none of it crossed his desk, so to speak. He was a man who lived on the surface of things. He enjoyed comfort and routine and the pleasant feeling of a life running smoothly. And Mara kept his life running smoothly. She just did it so well that he never had to think about it. She managed the house without being asked. She remembered which days were important to him, to his mother, to the friends he was careless about keeping. She planned the dinners and handled the details and made sure there was always milk in the refrigerator and fresh towels in the bathroom. She did this not because she was told to, but because she cared. Because when you love someone, you try to make their life easier. You do the small things. You show up. The problem was that Edward had confused her showing up with the guarantee that she always would. There was an evening in the 5th year of their relationship that Mara still thought about. She had sat across from Edward at the dinner table and said, carefully and clearly, that she was tired. Not tired in the way sleep fixes. Tired in a deeper way. She told him she felt as though she was the only one putting effort into the life they shared. That she needed him to see her, really see her, and to try. Edward had put down his fork. He had looked at her with genuine concern. He had said, Mara, I hear you. I'll do better. She had believed him. More than that, she had felt relief so strong it made her eyes water. That was how much she had needed to hear those words. Not a grand promise or a sweeping gesture, just 3 simple words, I'll do better. The next morning he left his coffee cup on the counter. He had done this every day for 5 years. She had asked him twice before, gently, to put it in the sink. He forgot again. She picked it up and put it in the sink herself and said nothing. This is not a story about coffee cups. But sometimes a coffee cup is not a coffee cup. Sometimes a coffee cup is every small thing a person keeps doing after they have said they will stop. Every small thing that says, clearly and without any words, that they were not really listening. She stopped asking. Not because she no longer cared. But because she was tired of the sound of her own voice asking. She started spending more time in her room. At first it was just the evenings, reading, writing in her journal, sitting with her thoughts in a way that felt peaceful rather than lonely. Edward noticed, in the vague way he noticed things, that she was quieter. He told himself she was tired from work. He did not ask her directly. He did not knock on her door and sit beside her and say, Mara, are you all right? Are we all right? He assumed. He always assumed. The packing began so slowly that it did not feel like packing. She started with her books. She went through the bookcase one shelf at a time over the course of several weeks, separating the ones she wanted to keep from the ones she was finished with. The ones she wanted to keep went into a box. She told herself it was just organizing. She had always been an organizer. But the box stayed sealed. And she did not put the books back. Then the photograph of her and her mother came down from the desk. She wrapped it carefully in a piece of cloth and tucked it into her bag one Tuesday morning. She did this without thinking too hard about what it meant. She just knew she wanted it somewhere safe. Somewhere that was hers, without question. Then her grandmother's ring, a small silver thing with a pale blue stone, came out of the dish on the windowsill where it had lived for 3 years. She put it on her finger and kept it there. She had not worn it regularly in years. Now she did not take it off. Each thing she removed was a quiet decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a decision she announced. Just a slow, steady reclaiming of the things that belonged to her. The process was so gradual and so personal that Edward did not notice a single piece of it. He would have had to be paying a very particular kind of attention to notice. He was not. Mara spoke to her sister once during this time, not about leaving, because she had not yet named it as that, even to herself. She spoke about feeling lost. Her sister listened carefully and then asked a simple question. Are you happy, Mara? Mara sat with the phone against her ear and looked out of her window at the garden. The rose bush near the fence was blooming. She had planted it 2 summers ago. She thought about that, about the care she had put into that rose bush, and how Edward had said it was lovely when it first bloomed, and then never mentioned it again. I used to think happiness was the most important question, she finally said. Her sister waited. Now I think I've just been asking the wrong person, Mara added quietly. Then she changed the subject, because she wasn't ready yet. But the words stayed with her long after the call ended. The day she left was a Wednesday. Nothing about it felt significant. The sky was the flat gray of early autumn, not dramatic, just quiet. She had been up since before the sun, moving through the house in the soft morning darkness with a calm she had not expected. She had thought, in the weeks before, that leaving would feel enormous. That it would feel like tearing something. Instead it felt like exhaling after holding her breath for a very long time. She took 2 trips to the car. The first was the larger box, books, her journal, a few things from her desk. The second was a bag and the photograph, wrapped carefully in its cloth. She looked around her room one last time. The bed was made the way she had always made it, corners tucked, pillows straight. The bookcase held only the books she was leaving behind, the ones she had already finished, the ones she no longer needed to carry. The candle was gone. The photograph was gone. The ring was on her hand. The room felt like a guest room already. Like somewhere a person passed through rather than lived. She did not leave a long letter. She left a short one. 3 sentences. She put it on the kitchen table where he would find it when he came down. She did not reread it before she left. She already knew what it said. It said everything she had tried to say for years, and had finally stopped saying, and had finally decided to simply show instead. She did not slam the door. She pulled it shut behind her softly, the way she had always done everything, and walked to her car in the quiet morning air. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment. She looked at the house. The front window, behind which she had spent 7 years of her life. The rose bush near the fence, just barely visible from where she sat. She did not cry. She had thought she would. Instead she felt something settle in her chest, not happiness, exactly, not yet, but something lighter than anything she had felt in years. Something that belonged only to her. She started the car and drove away. Edward came home that evening at his usual time. He set his keys on the hook by the door. Mara had put that hook there in the first year, so he would stop losing his keys, and walk toward the kitchen. He noticed the quiet first. The house had a particular sound when Mara was in it, a kind of low warmth, even when she was not making any noise. He had never named it before. He noticed its absence before he noticed anything else. He found the letter on the kitchen table. He read it standing up, still in his coat. Then he read it again. Then he set it down very carefully, as though it were fragile, and stood there in the kitchen of his quiet house for a long time. He went upstairs. He told himself he was not going to her room. He went to her room. The door was open, it was always closed before, always with the small understanding that knocking was required, and seeing it open like that, casually and permanently, was somehow worse than anything else. He stood in the doorway. The bookcase. The desk. The windowsill where the ring dish used to sit. The place on the wall where the photograph had hung, slightly lighter than the surrounding paint because the frame had protected it from years of afternoon light. All of it present and all of it empty. He sat down on the edge of her bed. The perfectly made bed with the military tucked corners. He sat there and looked at the windowsill, and something moved through him that he did not have a word for. It was not quite grief, not yet. It was the understanding, arriving all at once and far too late, that a person had been in this room every day choosing to stay. And that choosing had not been automatic. It had not been guaranteed. It had been a decision she made, over and over, for 7 years. And he had never once told her he was grateful for it. He had treated her permanence the way people treat sunlight, as something that simply exists, without anyone having to work for it. He called her phone. It rang 4 times. Her voice on the voicemail, warm, unhurried, the voice he had stopped really hearing, asked him to leave a message. He sat there with the phone against his ear after the tone, saying nothing. Then he ended the call. He did not try again. Mara drove through the night and arrived at her sister's house before dawn. Her sister met her at the door without a word and held her for a long moment in the doorway, and Mara let herself be held, which she had not done in a very long time. They made tea and sat together in the kitchen while the sky outside slowly turned from black to dark blue to the pale gray of early morning. Mara talked. Her sister listened. That was all that needed to happen. In the weeks that followed, Mara did the difficult, quiet work of beginning again. She found a small apartment with windows that faced east so the mornings were full of light. She unpacked her books and put them on a new shelf. She hung her mother's photograph on the wall above her desk. She planted a small pot of herbs on the windowsill, rosemary, thyme, because she liked the smell and because they were alive and because caring for something small and living felt like the right way to start. She booked the trip to Portugal. She had first mentioned Portugal to Edward 5 years earlier and he had said, maybe someday, in the vague way people say things they do not intend to do. She had stopped bringing it up. Now she booked the trip herself, for herself, without asking anyone or waiting for permission she was never owed in the first place. She went alone, which frightened her, and then stopped frightening her, and then became one of the best things she had ever done. She walked along the coast in the early mornings when the light was low and gold and the sea was the color of hammered silver. She ate at small restaurants where she did not know anyone and no one expected anything of her. She sat on a stone wall one afternoon and watched a group of children trying to fly a bright yellow kite in a wind that kept changing direction, and she laughed, not politely, not quietly, but a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and catches you off guard. She had not laughed like that in a long time. She had not known she missed it until it came back. She thought about Edward sometimes. She thought about the good version of him, the one from the early years, the one who had made her feel chosen. She understood now that he had not become a different person, that version had simply been the effort he made when he still had something to prove. The man he was without effort was the man she had spent 7 years quietly disappearing beside. She did not hate him for it. It is difficult to hate someone for not knowing how to love in the ways you needed, especially when you never fully stop showing up long enough to make the need impossible to ignore. Loving someone who does not know the value of what they have does not make your love worthless. It teaches you exactly how much you are worth. She came back from Portugal with a tan and a new journal and a kind of quiet certainty in her chest that she had not carried in years. The certainty was this: she was someone worth staying for. She had always been. She had simply been in a house where the person who mattered could not see it, and she had stayed long past the point when hope stopped being reasonable. She did not regret loving him. She did not regret the 7 years. They had given her things too, laughter and warmth and a rose bush that was probably still blooming in a garden she would never visit again. What she knew now, standing in her own small apartment with her east-facing windows and her herbs on the sill, was that she would never again make herself invisible to keep someone else comfortable. She would take up space. She would ask for what she needed. She would leave when leaving was the right thing to do. Edward spent the months after Mara left in a way he would not have predicted. He had expected the absence to be manageable. He was the Duke, after all, composed, self-sufficient, a man who had never leaned too visibly on anyone. What he had not expected was how much of his daily life had been quietly held in place by her. Not just the practical things, the clean house, the full refrigerator, the social plans he never had to arrange because she arranged them. More than that. The warmth. The sense that the house was inhabited rather than simply occupied. The feeling of being known. He learned to make his own coffee. This sounds like a small thing, and it was a small thing, and it was also somehow enormous. He stood in the kitchen on the first morning, looking at the machine, trying to remember how she had always done it, and realized he had never once watched closely enough to know. He had just drunk the coffee she made. Every single morning for 7 years. Without a word of thanks he could recall. He found one of her books one evening, tucked behind a cushion on the sofa. A small paperback with her name written in her careful handwriting on the inside cover. He sat with it for a long time without opening it. Just held it. Something about holding an object that was hers, that still carried something of her, her handwriting, her choice of book, made him understand the size of what he had lost in a way that words had not managed. He did not try to contact her again. He understood, in the way that some lessons arrive only when everything is already over, that there are certain things you cannot undo with a phone call. That a woman who leaves as quietly as Mara left is not a woman who is waiting to be called back. She has already decided. She decided long before she packed the first box. The packing was not the decision, it was simply the point at which the decision finally had somewhere to go. He thought about the letter she had left. 3 sentences. He had read them so many times that they were no longer on the paper but inside him, permanent and unshakable. The 3rd sentence was the one that stayed with him the longest. It said, "I am not leaving because I stopped loving you. I am leaving because I finally started remembering myself." Some time later, Edward was at a dinner, a friend's birthday, the usual crowd, the usual noise. A woman across the table said something that made him think of Mara, the way small things kept doing. He smiled, and then the smile faded, and someone asked him if he was all right. "Yes," he said. Because he was. Mostly. But he was also, in a way he would carry for a long time, a man who understood something he wished he had understood sooner, that the most important thing a person can do for someone who loves them is to pay attention. Real attention. The kind that notices when the photograph comes down from the wall. The kind that asks, before things are too far gone, what the other person needs. The kind that does not assume permanence but earns it, quietly, every single day. He had not known how to do that. Now he did. Whether he would do it differently with someone else, only time would tell. But he knew, with the certainty that only loss can give, that he would not be careless in the same way again. The empty room had taught him that. The perfectly made bed. The bare windowsill. The woman who had loved him with everything she had, and who had loved herself enough, eventually, to go. She had not slammed the door. She had pulled it shut gently, the way she did everything, with care, with grace, without making a scene. And in that quietness was everything, all the love she had given, all the patience she had spent, and the quiet, unshakable dignity of a woman who finally walked toward something that had her name on it. End of proof.